This is another edition of the Heel to the Face podcast. Rumors have it that they're trying to push WrestleMania's date a few weeks into the future. Right now, a lot of people are saying that WrestleMania looks like it might be slated to be middle of April. Brandon, I asked you the question, does changing the date by a few days or a few weeks, do you think it's going to make a difference?
It's possible. I mean, it depends on what happens with this vaccine. I mean, there's a lot of different reports out there, so a few weeks could really make a difference, to be honest with you, believe it or not.
We're going to talk about that and a big story to top everything off as the Heel to the Face podcast starts right now.
So silence your cell phones, hold your applause, and tune into the truth.
Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody.
Getting beat up by 9 guys in Syracuse, to me, there's not a whole lot of shame in.
From the 315 to the world, this is the Heel to Face podcast.
The cream of the crop! Wow, man, freaked out!
Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Heel to the Face.
I said, are you ready?
From Armory Square in downtown Syracuse, New York, let's send it now to Brandon and Jared.
Bad luck seems to be my middle name. They might as well tag me up with my buddies from Syracuse.
So this is another edition of the Heel to the Face podcast. We're joined as always by Brandon Clements, myself, Jared Wicks. Make sure to follow the program at Heel to the Face on Twitter. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you listen or watch us. Wherever it is, make sure you subscribe and get notified so that our videos and our podcasts show up right on your phone or your listening devices, so you don't even have to look for us. As we're hitting the air about an hour after some big news in WWE, it is a Friday night, and one person who will not be around this Friday Night SmackDown will be Zelina Vega. About 2 hours ago, she tweeted out that she fully supports unionization in wrestling, and the tweet was, "I support unionization." And it was only about a few minutes later that WWE announced she was being released. Now, to me, that is not a good look in WWE. I'm relating this news brand new to Brandon right now. I can see it in his face as I say this, so I can't wait to get over to his side. I'll just ask you, Brandon, is this a good look for WWE?
As you can tell, I mean, and for the listeners, I mean, I know we have our viewers watching, but for the listeners at home, Jared can see my face, and I'm very shocked by this. So Zelina Vega voices her opinion on something, and now she's cut, she's gone. That, to me, that's ridiculous. Like, you know what? Like, WWE, you can't control what everybody does in their lives. It's ridiculous. Somebody, this is the problem with society as a whole. Real quick, I want to go into that real quick because, when somebody doesn't agree with you, and even though you may have the facts behind you that are correct, guess what? You're still the bad person because you don't agree with what maybe what WWE says, or maybe a friend you're talking to on social media. It's a mess across the board. You can't do that. Like, WWE, that's a terrible look. And you know what? I hope AEW scoops her up as soon as she gets that non-compete out of the way, because Zelina Vega she is really good. She's good on the mic. I think she's pretty good in the ring as well. I thought they were giving her a little bit of juice before all this. I mean, she's had a couple good matches lately. WWE dropped the ball on this one. It's funny because I think it's a double standard. Because here's the thing: if it was Randy Orton that said something like this, Randy Orton gets a slap on the wrist and we're good. Because the things that Randy Orton has done over the years, he should have been fired about 15 times. Let's be honest with you. But you know what? It's because it's Randy Orton and this and that. And yes, he's a hell of a talent. He's one of the great wrestlers of all time. So I mean, it's kind of hard to compare him to Zelina Vega. But it's like, if you're on the top of the totem pole, you get a free pass. When you're kind of, fumbling around the low to mid-end card and you say something that I don't think is that big of a deal and then you get caught, that's absolutely ridiculous.
I think what you're alluding to in a way, and I think I'd like to kind of make more of a point. We're talking about what she did now. I think what you're trying to say is that if she said something that was bad or controversial or something that was, I don't know, something that I could see definitely has gotten people fired before. But this isn't just saying that, she supports communism. She supports, anti-Donald Trump or one of these, like CM Punk did a few weeks ago where he kind of trolled Linda McMahon. when she was upset Donald Trump lost the election recently, and was showing that he was a Joe Biden supporter kind of thing. That's a little more personal. That's a little more something that you shouldn't do when it comes to, your place of employment. But she tweeted out something that is essentially, it says, I support unionization. What she essentially is saying is, I support fair and equal treatment of myself and coworkers at my place of work. And it's not just saying I support unionization for wrestlers. She supports unionization across the country. Maybe she's not just saying, maybe she was just saying it in general for teachers, for nurses, for everybody. So it's a bad look on WWE, not because they fired her after she said something that was a controversial tweet or something that, like you said, Randy Orton would get a slap on the wrist for. It's something that it makes it a bad look because she said something that people are in favor of in WWE. People are pining for. Obviously, former presidential candidate Andrew Yang was a big supporter of WWE, giving wrestlers more rights and better pay and stuff like that. So for her to say something that, I guess it goes against Vince McMahon and I guess the company standard, but it doesn't go against, I guess, the moral and ethical standards we got going on right now in the country. So that's why it is a bad look for WWE. I guess the only way I could equate it to is if, WWE was, in which they are, a very conservative company, and she said something like, I'm for gay rights. Now, that would be something that is actually universally welcomed, but in a specific company, not universally welcome because they have a specific stance on that. So that's why I think this is a bad look for WWE, because they are letting someone go because they tweeted out something that not just is what every wrestler feels, but is something that is universally wanted. It is not, like I said, it is not something where she's going against a trend and feeling a certain way. I feel every wrestler probably, or at least a lot of them, would probably second that. They're not going to tweet it out, but it's unfair that she's getting let go for saying something that is, I guess, moral and ethically correct. And to be honest with you, I don't know. Obviously, losing your paycheck stinks, but I don't think she's going to lose sleep at night like somebody who might have tweeted out something that was racist or something that was very, derogatory, because that's happened in the past. People have said actual things that people are going to go like, oh, I can't believe you said that, you're going to get fired. And if you're not going to get fired, we're going to pressure your company to fire you because it's so offensive and so controversial and so rude. There's people who are, I think Halloween just came to mind recently within the city of Syracuse, Syracuse City School, or in Oklahoma. In Oklahoma, but also in the city of Syracuse, somebody wore a controversial costume, and it got them in trouble. And I feel that more people were against that. So it wasn't just the bosses up top saying that this is not right. It was coworkers. It was other people saying, that's a little controversial. You probably shouldn't have done that. I don't agree with that stance. But this case, all her coworkers and all her peers agree with her stance. She's only going against something that the head of WWE does not want, but it is something that, she's not alone in, but she put it out there. She tweeted it. She didn't put it out there with F-bombs and curse words. She just simply put out what essentially everyone's feeling. And now WWE looks even worse because they're not just not unionizing, but then they're firing anyone who even suggests it. It's just wrong.
No, and I do want to add a little bit more to that. Just kind of, bouncing off what you're saying. It's a terrible look. And I just think it's just a reflection of society as a whole. And I'll say it again, with social media the way it is, you could say something that, you don't have any ill intentions at all. It could be something, maybe in this case, it sounds like something that she's really passionate about, but it could be something half-hearted where you're joking maybe in a way. But things get so misconstrued nowadays. And for her to lose her job over, something she supports, which is not even, like you said, it's not even a bad thing. Like most companies,
you have to apologize for. Like the things that Hulk Hogan's have said, or even, I don't know if Randy Orton has said anything, but I bet you he probably has, knowing everything he said. But there, CM Punks, these kind of people have actually said things that they've had to apologize for. In this case, she's like, go, but I wouldn't, even if they said, we're not going to let you go, but we want you to apologize for it, I would probably think that she'd probably say no. I'm not. This isn't something you apologize over.
Yeah, I agree. I think she would just kind of no, it's my stance on it, and it's just sad, and it's a terrible look by WWE. It's going to leave a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. I think it's just and this is another reason why people are really turning and leaning towards AEW, because AEW is more open. They're very free about how you do things. Like literally, John Moxley, obviously before the pandemic, he was doing shows all over, indie shows, and then as long as he reported for duty for Dynamite or a pay-per-view, they don't care what you do. They don't care. If you want to expand your brand and do other things, that's great. WWE is kind of like I hate to use the word dictatorship, but it's a dictatorship. It really is. And if you can't, they don't even let you do anything. And here's the other thing. I don't think she's going to be hurting financially, because if you follow along a little bit, she has, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm wrong, you internet, trolls or internet wrestling community can correct me on it, but I believe she has an OnlyFans, which I think you know what that stuff is. But I heard she has OnlyFans.
She cosplays as different outfits. In fact, it's kind of funny, obviously, to show how abrupt this was. And, WWE might even say something like, the release had nothing to do with the tweet, but kind of shows where that's hard to believe is the fact that she did what a couple WWE wrestlers have done as of the last few days, and they cosplayed The Undertaker, and they dressed up as The Undertaker, and WWE posted it to their official Twitter accounts. It was part of a company-wide thing. So if WWE does try to say something like, this was unrelated to her tweet, we were letting her go anyways, and it's like, yeah, well, then why did you, support her dressed up as The Undertaker just like yesterday? So it doesn't seem like that was something that you already had planned to do. So overall, it's a bad look for WWE. But one place we can move on, and where maybe wrestlers might be getting a little benefit, I guess. And maybe some will say this is a benefit. Maybe some will say it's not a benefit. But WWE, and recently those who have been talking in the back, have found out that when this pandemic is all over with and WWE and the world returns to normal, the WWE has no intention of returning to the house show schedule that it used to have. Essentially, pretty much getting rid of house shows. A lot of people have said that house shows were a place where the big priority was to sell merchandise. But once the pandemic hit and house shows went away, they found out that, without house shows, the merchandise just rose on WWEshop.com to even out to what they would be making at house shows. I imagine they're still losing out overall because there's no pay-per-views and stuff like that. And there's obviously T-shirts and event shirts that are specific to pay-per-views. For example, I think they would have made more money at WrestleMania on WrestleMania merchandise than on Shop Zone, because people like myself aren't even buying any of it when I would have probably spent $100 or $2. Same with SummerSlam or Money in the Bank or anything like that. But they're saying overall the merchandise sales that would be made at a house show and the revenue that that kind of brings in, they're finding out, obviously going 8 months now without a house show, that they can live without it. What is your opinions on no house shows in WWE post-pandemic going forward?
I mean, for me personally, I don't feel any effect by it, to be completely honest with you, because I don't, we talked about this on many times. We have these Syracuse live events, and we've had them plenty of times over the years, and I've always said I'd rather go to a Raw or SmackDown or a pay-per-view than going to a live show, because it's not part of the story. But I do feel bad for the kids. I really do. I feel terrible for the children, because I was that little kid going to the War Memorial, watching, Shawn Michaels, things like that back in the day. So it's tough. It's tough to see that aspect of it. But, for me personally, I don't have any effect with it. The only downside is we're not going to have any shows in Syracuse. So I hope that's a sign for AEW to come to Syracuse.
Well, with that being said, I guess my opinion on house shows will be a few things. I mean, house shows go back for years. I mean, we're not talking just now. We're talking the 80s. We're talking back in the day, there was more house shows than there was ever TV shows. People kind of find it funny that wrestlers traveled 200 nights a year back in the 80s and 90s when they're only on TV once every 2 weeks. So you're like, how are you traveling so much? You're never even on television. There's 2 pay-per-views a year. But they were always traveling. House shows took precedent. But what I'll say is this. What I hope is not just the elimination of house shows and then business as usual with Raw and SmackDown and pay-per-views. What I hope is, one, that now that you're not going to some of these smaller cities, now that you're not going to the Syracuses, the Binghamtons of the world, maybe you'll expand your television presence in those areas. AEW so far, because they're so small, they've kind of traveled a little bit of everywhere because they have a real, I guess, no solid ground of playing Madison Square Gardens only or Chicago's only. They've been they were coming to Rochester. They were going to New Mexico. They were going to a lot of small markets. So AEW, I think, would have continued to do that. I think AEW coming to Syracuse is probably on the horizon if it comes around where they're going to be a show for the next couple of years and they finally get back to TV again. I could see a show come to Syracuse in the next couple of years because it's about the size of the arenas they've been running. So I hope that Raw and SmackDown do the same. If you live in Chicago, I feel like the Allstate Arena, you get Raw and SmackDown multiple times a year. Buffalo gets a Raw or a SmackDown at least once a year. Albany, New York City, Boston, Los Angeles. I would like to see, you can obviously hit those markets once a year for sure. But I would like, instead of returning to Miami for the second time in a year, hit up Syracuse's. And I feel that what I'm saying is something that is not out of the ordinary because we've talked about it before. In the Attitude Era, they did do that. I mean, I've been watching a lot of Nitros recently from the 90s, and I've been watching a lot of old Raws, and they did come to Syracuse, Lake Placid, Binghamton. I was watching a Nitro the other day from Casper, Wyoming. They came to Omaha, Nebraska. They came to Wichita, Kansas, not just Kansas City. So I would, if Raw and SmackDown can do a thing where they hit up all these cities that they're not holding house shows anymore, maybe not all of them. You're not going to hit up the real small ones, but the ones that have arenas, the Syracuses of the world, the Colorado Springs, the Fresno, Californias. If you can hit up those places again on your TV show, and it might actually make it a little more rare because, to be honest with you, like I just said, they do hit up Buffalo once a year. Instead of Buffalo twice a year, how about one of those times be one of the cities you're missing on a house show? And I guess my second point is not maybe elimination fully of house shows, because, I mean, I like no house shows as a theory, but, maybe do kind of have some special events. I'm not saying be done with house shows, just Raw, SmackDown, and pay-per-view, but you can do, some the Smackvilles, I guess you did in the past, the WWE Network specials, the Madison Square Garden post-Christmas Day Super Show with both brands. Those things I still do hope. But as overall, I'm happy for the wrestlers that don't have to travel as much. Sad for some of the other wrestlers who like to take the time to hone their craft at house shows and get noticed because they don't have the time on TV. That's where I think it's the toughest. And that's, I think, the people who are going to be hurt the most out of this.
I will say that, I'll just kind of bump off of that a little bit. I think because of the aspect of having the performance center, I think you still get a lot of practice in the ring, and I think you do get a practice in almost like a live setting, which is why you have NXT, for example. So I get that part of it to a certain aspect, but back in the day, they didn't have, the performance center. So it's a little bit different of an animal. So for me, I don't see it becoming that much of an issue. I think it's one of those things where it comes down to dollars and cents. I've talked about this in the last couple years I've been doing this. It comes down to the bottom line. And when WWE shop, and I've done it plenty of times, when I'm watching a show, whether it's live or I record it and I watch it a little bit later on that night, they got deals where you get a T-shirt, buy one, get one for $1. How many times have you just said, well, you know what, it's a good deal, I'm going to buy 2 shirts tonight. So if they keep doing stuff like that, they're going to make so much money where it doesn't even matter about the, going to the arenas, for live events in these small cities. You don't have to, because the way the world is now, everything is right in front of your face on the TV screen. Everything's digital. You don't actually have to go to an arena to purchase, that limited edition, Bray Wyatt T-shirt or something. You can literally get it right on WWEshop.com. And for AEW, you got Pro Wrestling Tees. So you get your stuff in the mail. So because here's the thing. I know when I used to go to shows as a kid, that was one of the things I really enjoyed. I was a merchandise guy. My dad and myself, we would go to the shows. My dad still has the D-Generation X, like the circa 1998 green bandana. He's got a Stone Cold license plate. He's got one of those. We used to go to the shows not only for the shows, but we would go there for the merch. But this is also in the late 90s, early 2000s. So as technology has evolved, WWE is finally evolving to a point where we can you don't have to have that. You don't have to have merchandise there. You can still sell merchandise at the Raws, SmackDowns, the pay-per-views, the NXTs, and still make $1. and you have WWE Shop. So for me, I think it's a good financial move for WWE. It's sad. Again, it's sad for the kids. I get it because I was that kid. But at the same time, just like anything else, you got to make the right business moves. And here's the thing. One other thing. This could save more jobs than you think because you're not spending so much money to go to Syracuse in front of 1,000 fans.
Well, I guess kind of to piggyback off that, though, I mean, Tony Chimmel was just released the other day, and when it comes to saving jobs, there are a few jobs, though, that might be cost because you're part of the live event crew. If you're somebody who literally just works the house show side of things, you're one of the people who sets the stage up. You're one of the people you're one of the ring announcers who aren't on TV, but one of the people that show up at the house shows. Because when they do house shows, it's not the typical TV ring announcers. It's the formerly, I don't know who you'd say now, like gays, one of the backstage, the JoJos of the world, the Caleb Braxtons of the world. They're the ones who are the hosts of the house shows.
Byron Saxton used to do it. I remember going to a show, my last live show I ever went to in Syracuse. If I'm not mistaken, I think Byron Saxton was the MC. But here's the thing. I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying about that. But I think I think it's the same road crew for Raw and SmackDowns. So when they get back on the road, they're still going to go to Chicago. They're still going to go to Buffalo. They're going to go to these places. I don't think it's going to be as much of an impact as you think because it's the same road crew as always.
Here's what I would say. If I ran things, especially, I definitely say get rid of a lot of house shows for sure. But if I ran things post-pandemic, I mean, I might be taking things slow just because it's post-pandemic. But when things fully get back to normal, I actually might run house shows in a normal schedule just for the first year or two, just because I feel that when we finally get back to wrestling or sports in general, things are going to be hotter than ever. And it's so strange that to not go off of, just the house shows, but similar to what's going on in minor league baseball, obviously there's going to be 42 teams that are not going to have cities and they're not going to have teams anymore, where I read articles every single day about places like Burlington, North Carolina, or Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where they could say at one time that they saw some big stars come through their little towns and they got to see Major League Baseball where they can't afford to go to Wrigley Field or Yankee Stadium. So it's the same idea with house shows. You get to see Jeff Hardy or Randy Orton in Watertown, New York, or in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and you get to see them up close and personal, when you can't afford to drive to New York City and see the pay-per-views. So I guess my thing is, I wish that, these decisions were made with like a farewell tour in mind for both minor league baseball and for wrestling, where, it's not just COVID just killing it immediately. So people like myself say, well, I guess we've seen our last house show. Maybe we get a chance to go to one more before they phase them out. And I guess one more thing is I would probably say if I kept the house shows, I would keep the house shows, but I'd keep the house shows only in small markets, meaning Buffalo's, Chicago's, New York City's, LA, they do get house shows too, and the TV shows and the pay-per-views. So, yeah, you could probably save, because the whole reason I would want to save house shows is for the reasons I just mentioned, the kids, the crowds in small markets. But, yeah, the house shows at the United Center in Chicago or in Miami or New Orleans, you could save those because Raw and SmackDown's coming to town in a few months, or, you know what I mean? Like, for example, I've been at WrestleMania when – the Raw after WrestleMania, they're announcing in 6 months we'll be back to Tampa for a house show, and it's like they don't need a house show. This is a market that gets enough television shows. They don't need the house show.
I got something for you real quick. I know we've been talking about this for a few minutes. One last point. What if you go, say, for example, I'm just going to use upstate New York because that's where we're from. So what if you do a Monday Night Raw in Buffalo, New York, and your Friday Night SmackDown is in, we'll say, Albany, New York? And then NXT goes to Syracuse, New York. There you go. That could be a cool thing to do, where you bring in NXT to the smaller cities where it's like minor league baseball in a sense because you're getting some of the big names before they go to Raw and SmackDown.
Yeah, that's an idea. That's an idea. You bring down the WWE house show circuit. Maybe you bring up the NXT house show circuit. Exactly. And again, I think people are going to be clamoring for live sports and everything. So I just hope that when this is all over with, we'll all have an option to do this stuff and that, all these options won't be long gone. And without house shows, people are afraid that pay-per-view and Raw TV prices might go up because now, those are your only chances to go see them. So I hope we're not priced out of things. I hope we have a chance to go see things. And I hope that overall, like let's say WWE is not going to come to Syracuse twice a year for a house show. But let's hope that they do eventually come back for something eventually. And not just be done with it, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
As we move on, let's talk some AEW. I thought a great pay-per-view event. I can only imagine if it was in front of a large crowd, but either way, AEW, just top to bottom, great pay-per-view event, Full Gear, about 3.5-hour event. Jon Moxley retained his belt against Eddie Kingston. A lot of people are saying it's a pretty brutal match. I thought it was pretty on par. They did some kind of brutal things, but I feel with AEW, I've seen some more brutal things. But overall, the Young Bucks, the new champions, they're never going to contest for the championships. Guys, Darby Allin, the TNT champion. Full Gear, what was your impressions?
Overall, I thought it was a pretty good show. I have to say, I really enjoyed Darby Allin and Cody Rhodes. Let me rephrase that. The new Cody Rhodes, so to speak. I know he's got the Rhodes part now. Just like to mention that again. But that was a great match. I enjoyed watching Darby win. And I do like the sportsmanship where Cody kind of bowed to him and said, hey, congrats on the championship belt. And it kind of led into Dynamite this week where I'm not saying they're forming a team, but it sounds like they got at least a little mutual respect for each other where they're going to, they got each other's backs in a way. So I thought that whole thing was cool. To go back to Full Gear, I like the fact that MJF is in the Inner Circle. I thought it was a decent match for what it was. MJF always does a great job, and it's Chris frickin' Jericho, so I thought that was fun. Young Bucks, I think we kind of figured that was going to happen. I thought that was probably one of the better matches of the night.
Did you like the deletion?
What's that?
Did you like the Elite deletion match?
I'm not surprised by it. It was like a theatric version of AEW's theatric version of a wrestling match. I think they did it pretty well. I thought, lighting off fireworks at each other, things like that. That was kind of a cool aspect of it. It's good to see, Matt Hardy still can do those brutal spots. And Sammy Guevara, the sky's the limit for him. I'm glad to see he's working with a guy like Matt Hardy because when you work with a guy like Matt Hardy, who's been a pro's pro since we were kids, practically the last 20 some odd years, it's a good person to learn from. So, I'm excited for the future for Sammy Guevara because not only is he working with Matt Hardy, but he's got Jericho as, another mentor. So the sky's the limit for him. I thought overall it was a pretty solid card.
Yes, I was a little jealous, I guess a little disappointed that the two times in the past 6 months that I have driven past the Matt Hardy compound, that they weren't filming that, because while they're filming the match, I literally thought, how awesome would this be if one of the two times that I was driving by in the last 6 months that, they were doing, if I lived in the area, I won't lie, I would have probably tried to drive by every so often. My guess is they probably did it at 2:00 in the morning so that no one even knew what was going on. But I mean, I've driven by that house. That is indeed Matt Hardy's house. He's there. I've seen him outside of his house. That one time I drove by, and I've driven by a few times. But yeah, a little jealous. It's wow, how awesome would this have been if I was having to drive by and park my car and they were filming this and I could have watched this on his front yard.
And I got two other things to add to that match in particular. Gangrel,
yes.
Hurricane Helms. Pretty cool.
Yes, I agree there. And, moving on to AEW Dynamite this week, Sammy Guevara, talking about Matt Hardy. I think his new feud, it looks like it's going to be MJF and Sammy Guevara. Do you see a little inner circle turmoil going on there? I mean, it's pretty clear. Let's be real. We watch wrestling. MJF leaving Sammy Guevara high and dry, sending him an email to be elsewhere during the inner circle ceremony, and then making him feel left out of the group. Sammy Guevara obviously feels left out of the group. So do you see MJF and Sammy Guevara having a little being the next big feud in the inner circle?
I could see that, or I could see I think it's Ortiz. I always mix up Santana and Ortiz. I think Ortiz was not really happy with this, and he was I'm watching on Dynamite this week. He was making fun of MJF because of him quoting Drake and things like that. So
yes.
I kind of get the vibe. It's just weird. It was just weird. I mean, I think if it's anybody, I think it's Sammy Guevara, but don't count out Ortiz. I think you're going to see some turmoil in the inner circle. And there's another aspect that maybe people aren't paying attention to as much. Wardlow, Hager. Those two don't seem to be that close to each other. They kind of look at each other with these I'm the big guy look. I'm the guy who's the power in this group. I would love to see Wardlow and Hager drop bombs. That would be fun. But to me, that would be another aspect. I think the Inner Circle is bound to be splitting up. And here's the thing. Don't be surprised if it ends up just being MJF and Chris Jericho. Who knows? We don't know at this point. So Chris Jericho loves MJF, and MJF is another guy who's going to be a stud. And I think he's a stud anyways, but I'm saying he's going to be like a mega star. He's going to carry the business for a long, long time.
I want to ask you about the debut of Jade Cargill. Now, I did some research on her. Jade Cargill, she had trained before at AR Fox's school, Heath Slater's school, and with QT Marshall most recently. About a year ago, she was released from WWE in the NXT program. AEW picked her up. I found out actually that she is married to and has a child with a guy that I saw going back to the minor league baseball days, who ended up becoming a big star, is Brandon Phillips. I'm not sure. Does he still play? But I remember him from the Cincinnati Reds.
I feel like he still plays.
And the Cleveland Indians. Yeah, is he still a Cincinnati Red?
Your guess
I'm not sure. I'm not going to look that up at the moment. But, yeah, I didn't know that she's married to Brandon Phillips, and they have a kid together. But overall, Jade Cargill comes out during Cody Rhodes' his little promo talking about the TNT Championship. And a few things. First up, on the mic, I wasn't a fan of her on the mic. It just didn't sound too natural. And what the hell is she talking about, Shaq?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump on that. The whole Shaq thing is weird. I mean, I get that Shaq works for TNT, and obviously TNT, we know we get the parallels. I didn't think she was terrible on the mic. I wouldn't say she was a pro's pro, but I think she got her point across, and I really enjoyed, her little comments about, a giant and kind of looking at Cody in a certain direction and implying that, somebody's not giant in certain spots. And then, towards the end of it, she's walking back, to the, where the entrance is. And her and Brandy have a little spat. And then she smacks Brandy on the ass. I was like, oh, man, this is going off.
If you didn't think Jade Cargill was bad on the mic, I felt like it made her look even worse. Because when Brandy Rhodes came out, Brandy Rhodes was really good on the mic.
Well, she knows.
It wasn't just that I thought Jade Cargill was bad on the mic. She got a great body, and let me tell you, and I don't mean that from a sexual perspective. I mean she looks like someone who could definitely be an athlete that AEW needs. We've been talking
Bianca Belair. She could be AEW's Bianca Belair. I mean,
WWE has been leading in the women's division as of late. I mean, NXT has had a great women's division. WWE's had a great women's division. So AEW needs to definitely step it up in the women's division. But I definitely felt that she was a little bad on the mic, mainly because when Brandy Rhodes came out, it wasn't just me being critical. Like, if I showed two people who've never watched wrestling before and they wouldn't know what good or bad was on the mic, as soon as they saw Brandy Rhodes, they'd have been like, oh, okay, I see, because that was good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
like,
it's
the voice. And it was a side of Brandy Rhodes I've never even seen before, to be honest with you. I mean, it was kind of very unique for Brandy Rhodes to be, as fiery as she was and kind of, slang talk in the way she was. And, normally she's pretty well prestiged and put together. So it was a cool side of Brandy Rhodes I saw. I'd like to see where Jade Cargill goes. I hope she gets a little bit better on the mic. But like I said, she looks like she could be a great athlete. And hopefully, she helps elevate the AEW's women's division. As we stay on Dynamite, the match that kind of kicked things off that everyone was talking about this week was the bunkhouse match. Butcher and the Blade, Dusty Rhodes, QT Marshall, just tons of blood. Did you enjoy them? I thought that probably was, outside of Full Gear, the match of the week in terms of television programming.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I mean, to be critical, I'm not a huge QT Marshall guy. I just, I just don't think he's that great. I mean, maybe people in the wrestling community will disagree with me. That's fine. But overall, I thought it was pretty good. There's a lot of great blood, Butcher and the Blade's great, and Dustin Rhodes looks good. So overall, I thought it was a pretty good match. I don't know if I'd put it as match of the week, but it was pretty good.
So bunkhouse match is what they called it. Those was an old WCW name, so obviously AW has the permission to use that as of right now. WWE, though, has taken a few permissions away from them, including Bash at the Beach and Match Beyond, which is a way to refer to War Games. So WWE has filed trademarks for both those events. I wonder if that was, and heard rumors that could have been a trade-off for Cody Rhodes getting his name back, WWE getting those names trademarked. There will be a future Bash at the Beach, I guess, in AEW, but they have said it will be called Beach Bash going forward because they don't have the rights. So my question is, do you see WWE using these trademarks or just holding on to them?
I think they're going to hold on to them just to be jerks like they've obviously been, and what we've learned in the last couple hours. I think they're just going to do it to be simply just assholes.
What if they do, like I said, AEW is going to still do like they did last January when they were down in Miami, they did the Bash at the Beach television event. What would you say if NXT literally that week, countered with Bash at the Beach NXT?
I mean, it'd be good for the fans. I think it'd be really petty on WWE's part because that's what WWE is. They're very petty. AEW is just, they're just doing their thing and just rolling along. To me, it'd just be a bad look by WWE and the way they handle things and what you unfolded to me right at the beginning of the show. Obviously, WWE, they're very petty when it comes to certain things. So that's what turns me off about WWE sometimes is they're so petty. That's why I really do enjoy AEW. I think a lot better overall. I mean, I like NXT, but Raw and SmackDown have been eh. I mean, SmackDown's been good with Roman Reigns and what he's been doing, but the rest of it, I'm not really, I have to watch it. So I've been really intrigued with what AEW's been doing.
Cody Rhodes in AEW this week has said that he wants to bring back chair shots to the head. The reason he says this is because there's ways to do it safely. There's ways to sand down chairs to make them gimmick chairs. So I guess my question to you is, if they bring back shots to the head, but as Cody Rhodes mentioned, they pretty much laid out exactly how gimmicky this is. And we know wrestling's scripted and it can be gimmicky. But after he literally just told us the way the illusion is done, what is it worth bringing back chair shots to the head if now they're going to bring them back, but we know that it's now gimmicky?
Yeah, I mean, if it's going to be gimmicky, then I'll pass.
I'm fine with it being gimmicky if he didn't explain, or I guess if it didn't become public, how, describing the gimmicky. I guess my thing is, we all know wrestling's gimmicky, but we like the time where the line is a little bit blurred. So if Cody Rhodes is going to come out and specifically say, here's how the trick is done, and then do the trick, well, you're like, no, listen, I understand when I saw David Copperfield fly when I was like 6 years old at one of his magic shows. I went and saw him. I understand when I saw him fly that there was some sort of trick to it. But he didn't come out and explain the trick and then fly, because you're like, well, you just told us how you're doing that. Like, we understand that magic is an illusion, but it's an illusion. So the fact that Cody Rhodes has just detailed exactly how they're going to do it, then you're kind of like, well, then what's the point of bringing it back? If Undertaker was like, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to throw Mankind off the cell, but before I do, let me explain why it's safe and why, it looks real, but it's not. And then explain to us all the gimmick to it. Well, then if he then did it, we would have been like, who cares?
Well, that's
if
the thing.
explained to us after the fact, if they started doing chair shots to the head, and Cody Rhodes maybe like a year down the line maybe explained, you know what, we're doing them in a more safe way. That's all I can say, or something like that. Or we're doing them in a way where we're taking more precautions than usual. Then that's one thing. But it would have been like shocking to see it first. But now the first time I see it, I'm going to go, oh, he explained how to do that. He literally just had a news not a news conference, but a conference call explaining how to sand down the chair and how to gimmick a chair and all that kind of stuff. That I'm not interested.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it just takes away from it. And like you made the right analogy with Copperfield. I think that's completely correct. It's like a magician saying, "Oh yeah, this is how I do it. This is what we're gonna do." It just takes away from the aura. So for me, I'm with you. I think it's a hard pass. If you're gonna do that, then I don't even want it back at all.
Yes. So moving over to the WWE side of things, NXT. Little surprise this week, probably similar to Darby Allin winning the TNT Championship, because Cody Rhodes we thought was going to be a workhorse with the belt, kind of somebody who, carried the belt pretty equally to its prestige. Well, we thought the same about Johnny Gargano, the North American belt. Those two things seem to go together. Leon Ruff in a match against Johnny Gargano, you thought, well, that's just some filler time on NXT TV. He wins the belt. You were surprised. I was surprised. You excited to see Leon Ruff, or you wish that Johnny Gargano would have just kept it the way we were going and kept the belt?
I think Johnny Gargano should have just kept the belt. I mean, as cool as Leon Ruff is, for winning the match, I don't think he's ready for it. I think Leon Ruff has, from what I've seen, I mean, I can't say I'm an expert on, Leon Ruff and what he's done in the business, but I think he still has work to do to earn that title, like legitimately, I feel like. So for me, I think Gargano should have had the belt and he should have squashed Leon Ruff. That's just my take. But I know why they're doing it. They're really using this to build this feud between him and Damian Priest. Him meaning Gargano and Damian Priest. I think you're going to see a feud between those two. I think that's no doubter at this point.
So finishing off this week's show, I guess the last thing I'll ask you as we round out this week's show is the AEW video game. We're both in our 30s now. I can probably say that I'm not much of a video game person. Are you going to get one of these new consoles that comes out? And are you going to get the AEW video game?
Hard pass on the new console. I think it's way too much money. I don't play enough video games to justify the purpose. Like, I have a PS4, I got a Sega, I got a few other, I have a few other systems. To me, I don't see the point of dropping the money at this point. If it comes out on PS4 AEW, then I will consider buying it. But if it's going to be one of those PS5 deals, then maybe I won't. So it all depends on if it's going to be compatible with PS4.
So what you're saying is, if you have you might not buy the new system, but the game, you're definitely down for buying the game. I personally don't even have one of the new systems, so I don't foresee myself playing this new game. I haven't played a wrestling game in years outside of something that came out for like Super Nintendo. But yes, it's cool to see. It's cool that AEW's got a video game. It's crazy to think that Impact Wrestling at one time had a video game as well. So I guess it's not completely out of the realm. Just because AEW has a video game doesn't essentially mean they made it big time. Because again, Impact Wrestling at one time had a video game, and they're lower than they've ever been before. But so that's going to round out this week's show. Got some homework for you, Brandon. Next week's Survivor Series. Give us some of your favorite Survivor Series matches heading into Survivor Series. Undertaker's final farewell. We'll talk a little more WWE next week heading to Survivor Series, obviously with the Raw, SmackDown teams, the brand matches, the new tagline that they're adding to Survivor Series. I think it's something about the best of the best or something like that with the Raw and SmackDown deal going on. And I'll even bring up a few news and notes that came out surrounding this week's announcement of a few matches for upcoming Wrestle Kingdom. Yeah, that's right. In America, we're at a standstill, but you forget in other countries, they're moving along a little bit and got some crowds going. And New Japan Wrestling is going forward with Wrestle Kingdom 15 on January 4th and 5th, 2021. We'll talk all of that and much more for this week's edition of the Heel to Face podcast. For Brandon Clements, you can find him on Twitter at Icebreaker21, at myself at KRockJared, and the show at Heel to the Face. Till next week, this has been another edition of the Heel to the Face podcast.